The lines of Nazca are one of the most impressive-looking archaeological areas in the world, and an extraordinary example of the magical religious world of the ancient pre-Hispanic societies of South America. These massive images are located in the desert plains of the basin of the Rio Grande de Nazca. The archaeological site covers an area of roughly 75,000 hectares in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru, a dry plateau or pampa that stretches for 37 miles along the Pacific coast. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest and most sparsely populated places on Earth. For nearly 2,000 uninterrupted years, the region's ancient inhabitants drew thousands of large-scale zoomorphic and anthropomorphic figures and lines on the arid ground. Animals, birds, insects, other living creatures, flowers, plants, and trees, as well as geometric shapes and miles of lines of deformed or fantastic figures. In 1927, they were rediscovered, and a few years later, Dr. Maria Reiche began a lifetime of study and protection of these remarkable sites. The impressive story of the Nazca culture in Peru dates back to before the arrival of the Spanish conquest by almost 1,000 years. Over many centuries, ancient civilizations created a vast array of wonderful monuments all over Peru. These cultures developed advanced techniques of agriculture, gold and silver work, pottery, metallurgy, and weaving. Some of the social structures developed in these earlier civilizations would then also become the backbone of the later Inca Empire. Hello, and welcome to Unknown History. In this video, we will be covering the fascinating history of the mysterious Nazca lines in the deserts of Peru. In this documentary, we will examine the Nazca culture, how the lines were constructed, how they were discovered, various theories for their origins, and finally, what research is being done on the lines in our modern day. The Nazca culture dominated the Nazca Valley region from 200 BC to 700 AD. The Nazca brought a remarkable manifestation of common religion, social continuity, and wealth of resources that lasted their considerable period of rule. Despite the harshness of the desert valley they called home, where only 20 minutes of rain falls for the entire year. The Nazca survived thanks to the construction of numerous underground canals and aqueducts that allowed them to take advantage of the water from springs or river flows, and thus were able to alleviate the recurring problems of the region's near everlasting droughts. The Nazca were a class-structured and theocratic society, having the city at Huachi as a religious and political center. The temple at Huachi was composed of more than 40 pyramidal tops crowned by adobe structures. The largest pyramid at the temple consisting of 6 overlapping terraces that exceeded 20 meters in height. The god-king of Nazca society was the predominant figure, dominating both the political and religious aspects of the state. He had the power to organize and execute the work community and direct ceremonial activities. He was at the service of the same god of the earlier Paracas culture, Khan, who was the creator of the world and of men. Another of their gods was a hybrid being of feline fish and bird, known by the name of Boto. Besides this, not much else is known about the Nazca pantheon. The Nazca people would make pilgrimage to Huachi for special ceremonies and rituals. Although the permanent population of the area had been determined to be quite small, there were an estimated 25,000 people present during major ceremonial events. Archaeologists have also found a darker side to the Nazca culture by digging in the area. The discovery of several necropolises reveal a number of gruesome deaths which were carried out as a ritual sacrifice to the god of Khan. Oral tradition recalls the religious ceremonies where the heads of enemies were ritually decapitated and prepared as trophies and buried in temple rituals designed to favor the fertility of the earth. The Nazca people were also known for their beautiful embroidered fabrics. The wool was from llamas and alpacas, to which feathers and cactus needles would then be added. Nazca architecture was also very developed. In addition to the temple at Huachi, there was also solar observatories, houses, and public buildings with streets and squares that denote a true center of urban culture, and other cities have also been found. We must also mention the Nazca's inclination for the construction of musical instruments like the antares, tubes made from small cane rods, whose sounds were heard in their rituals and ceremonies. The Nazca culture began its decline in 700 AD, apparently due to progressive logging of the small forests of the region. These forest trees supplied the Nazca with their firewood and wood for construction. However, the forests also provided a valuable protection against flooding that, when removed, allowed the climatic phenomenon known as El Niño to flood the Peruvian coast without resistance. The flooding destroyed the civilization's irrigation system and killed crops, likely leading to widespread famine and the collapse of Nazca society. However, despite their downfall, the Nazca cultural influence would become important in the formation of the Wari Empire, which arose from 700 to 1200 AD. And while the Nazca civilization fell roughly 1400 years ago, the Nazca to the rest of the world are still best known for the dozens of carvings they etched onto the surface of the ground between 400 BC and 700 AD, which they lend their names to and can still be seen today, called the Nazca Lines. These lines are the most outstanding group of geoglyphs anywhere in the world and are unmatched in their extent, magnitude, quantity, size, diversity, and ancient tradition. The Nazca culture would have had to have invested massive amounts of manpower and other resources in order to create the Nazca Lines, and this was likely only possibly due to the authority of the god kings. The concentration and juxtaposition of the lines, as well as their cultural continuity, also demonstrate that this was an important and long-lasting investment for generations, lasting approximately 1,000 years, meaning that generations of Nazca people observed, maintained, and expanded the number of geoglyphs on the ground. The geoglyphs are one of the most unique and extraordinary artistic achievements of the Nazca, covering a massive area in the extremely arid Peruvian coastal plains between the towns of Pampa and Nazca. The Nazca Plain is unique in its preservation of these geoglyphs due to the combination of the climate, one of the driest in the world with little rainfall each year, and the flat stony ground, which minimizes the effects of wind erosion at the ground level. The desert and landscape of the surrounding region is so alien and unique to the rest of the planet that it is often chosen by filmmakers as a place to stage scenes that occur on Mars or other desert planets. Beneath the Nazca Desert's crust of pebbles, which contain ferrous oxide as a lighter-colored subsoil, the exposure over centuries has given the crust of pebbles a dark patina. When the dark gravel is removed, it contrasts with the pale-colored soil underneath that, when revealed on a large scale, can be used to create distinct shapes. The excess soil and rock was then often placed to the side of the geoglyph, which then stacked a few inches high to create a plaster layer that formed a hot-air mattress which managed to protect these important drawings from wind corrosion, allowing the lines to remain untouched for centuries. The ancient inhabitants of the Nazca culture used various measurement instruments when constructing the lines. The tupu, which was a metal or wooden plate placed perpendicular to the earth to project the shadow of the sun and moon, and the theodolite, which was a wooden or terracotta tube from which they hung a plumb line to trace the course of lines with string for the builders to follow and scrape away the soil on the designated string paths. In this way, the Nazca lines were drawn as furrows of a lighter color, even though in some cases they became prints. In other cases, the stones defined the lines and drawings from small lateral humps of different sizes. Some drawings, especially the earlier ones, were made by removing the stones and gravel from their contours, and in this way the figures stood out in high relief. The sheer number of lines and drawings leave no doubt that these were intensive long-term projects, as is demonstrated by the stylistic continuity of the designs, which clearly corresponds to the different stages of cultural changes and development in Nazca society. Apart from the anthropomorphic figures, the lines, which are generally straight lines, crisscross certain parts of the plateau in all directions. Some of these lines are several kilometers in length and form designs of many different geometrical figures, triangles, spirals, rectangles, and wavy lines. Other lines radiate from a central point or encircle it. Another group consists of so-called tracks, which appear to have been laid out to accommodate large numbers of people. The designs are laid out with outstanding geometric precision, transforming the vast land into a highly symbolic, ritualistic, and social-cultural landscape that remains to this day. The inspiration of their work suggests they may have been ritual offerings to a goddess, which even now relates to extraordinary natural celestial events such as solar eclipses. There were also cultures in ancient Peru that predated the Nazca that also had a tradition of creating geoglyphs. One of the best-known early geoglyphs is called El Candelabro, or the Trident, which is 600 feet tall and can be seen 12 miles out from sea. It is on the slope of a hill facing the ocean and was created by the Paracas people by removing the top layer of soil to reveal the lighter layer underneath in low relief. Initially, when this geoglyph was found, it was thought to relate to the people of Nazca, but when archaeologist Dr. Maria Ricci was measuring the geoglyphs, she found pieces of broken pottery belonging to the Paracas people on the site. Although the exact age of the design is still unknown, Dr. Ricci analyzed the broken pottery through carbon dating to around 200 BC, and it is assumed the pottery was likely used by the builders of the site. The wise men of the Paracas culture, forefathers of the Nazca people and culture, were great astronomers. They observed celestial events and realized the importance of time, nature, and the cosmos in the coming seasons. Almost all the Paracas culture's temples were near the ocean, mountains, rivers, hills, and valleys, which were considered sacred and alive. These skills in astronomy and construction, as well as the religious beliefs, were passed on to the Nazca culture. The Nazca then continued this tradition in their Nazca Valley to an even greater extent, creating their famous geoglyphs. Some of the most well-known Nazca line images include the hummingbird. Among the most popular of all the geoglyphs, it is easily identifiable because of its distinctive feathers, large beak, wings, and tail that have a wingspan of almost 220 feet. The spider, one of the first geoglyphs ever seen by famous American professor Paul Kosuk. Located near the edge of a trapezoid in a huge network of lines on the surface of the desert, this large figure is approximately 151 feet long. The condor. At 440 feet long and almost as wide, the condor is one of the largest geoglyphs in Nazca and is also known as the long-tailed mockingbird. The whale. This geoglyph is one of the most well-defined carvings in the Nazca Desert to date. Its defined fins and large mouth easily distinguish this geoglyph from any other. The astronaut, one of the most enigmatic of Nazca geoglyphs. Observers have theorized a number of interesting theories about what this one depicts, from fishermen to spacemen to googly-eyed extraterrestrials waving to passerbys. Despite the size of these magnificent geoglyphs, they were not well known to the outside world until the early 20th century, with only a small number of locals in the area being aware of their existence. A Peruvian archaeologist named Trujillo Mejia Yespi started methodically researching the Nazca lines in 1926. However, the geoglyphs only grabbed attention when pilots flew over the Nazca lines in 1930. Pilots' fantastic stories eventually led to a rise in the site's popularity and inspired scholars from around the world to come and investigate. This led to some of the most important people in the story of the Nazca lines arriving to the deserts of southern Peru, Dr. Maria Ricci and Dr. Paul Kosuk. Dr. Maria Ricci was born on May 15, 1903 in Dresden, Germany, where she then graduated from college in mathematics, geography, and astronomy, as well as learning to speak 5 languages. In 1932, she arrived in Peru to work in Cusco City as a teacher to the sons of a German consulate, where she lived for 3 years. She then dabbled in archaeology, investigating the famous site of Machu Picchu near Cusco. She then made a notable discovery when she discovered that a ritual stone related to an astronomical clock or calendar was aligned with the sun's position during the winter solstice in one of the temples at Machu Picchu. She carried out even more important astronomical research near Lima, perhaps one of the most important contributions to archaeology relating to the astronomical positions of the religious temples. During this time was when Peruvian archaeologist Trujillo Mejia Yespi first saw the lines in 1927, after finding them almost by accident since they are practically invisible at the surface. Yespi had assumed that they were sacred pathways that the ancient Nazca people used to walk in some sort of religious rite of passage or ceremony. In 1939, Paul Kosuk, an American professor in history at Long Island University in New York and the main expert on irrigation systems of ancient cultures of the world, came to Peru. The following year, he introduced Maria Ricci to the site and a new hypothesis soon developed. Paul and Maria happened to be standing near one of the long straight lines at sunset when they both made a discovery that would change their lives. The day happened to be June 21, 1939, the southern hemisphere's shortest day of the year. Kosik and Ricci noticed that the sun was setting almost exactly on the end of one of the Nazca lines, so it appeared to be a solstice line. Pronouncing the lines as the largest astronomy book in the world, Kosik then took aerial photographs in order to get a complete overview of the site. The following December, on the summer solstice, Ricci also found such lines and was captivated by the landscape and the scope of Kosik's project, and found her own life forever changed. With their new information, Ricci and Kosik quickly refuted the sacred pathways hypothesis that ESP had first hypothesized. In Ricci's view, which had changed little over the decades and centuries, the lines represented a gigantic astrological calendar recording the passage of seasons and predicting solar and lunar eclipses. The lines plot directions of the stars. For example, the spider is associated with the constellation of Orion, as is the monkey with Pleiades. The monkey, covering over 300 feet, was Ricci's favorite figure, and like Ricci herself, who had lost a finger at Cusco in an archaeological accident, displayed only 4 fingers on one hand, a divine characteristic that was found in other drawings at Nazca as well. Ricci also associated the enormous figure of the monkey with the Big Dipper constellation by uncovering lines that connected the figure that indicates the position of the constellation's biggest star. She also speculated that the monkey could perhaps be the god of water to the Nazca, since the appearance of the Big Dipper announces the arrival of the rainy season in Peru. After Kosik left Peru in 1948 and returned to America, Ricci continued to work and map the entire area, and determined that there were 18 different kinds of animals and birds depicted at Nazca. She also discovered that the Nazca had to have known calculus in order to have perfectly traced and portioned some of the gigantic figures. In other words, the Nazca had advanced understanding of geometry that was not thought possible in pre-Columbian societies. As the lines can only be best seen from high valley cliffs or airplanes, Ricci persuaded the Peruvian Air Force to help her make aerial photographic surveys of the site. Ricci devoted her life to saving this archaeological site, which is unique in the world. She worked alone from her home in Nazca and funded all the research by herself, only helped financially by her sister, Dr. Renta Ricci. In 1949, she published her theories in a book called The Mystery on the Desert. She then used the profits from her book to campaign for the preservation of the Nazca Desert and hire guards to protect the lines. The Pan American Highway, a government development, cut into several of the geoglyphs. To prevent this from happening again, Maria lobbied the Peruvian government and increased funding to educate the public on the Nazca lines. After paying for private security to protect the geoglyphs, she finally convinced the Peruvian government to restrict public access to the area, and they also provided towers near the highway so that visitors could have an overview of the lines and appreciate them without damaging them. Many scholars have followed her investigations, but it is through her lonely struggles against destruction and her passion for preservation that the Nazca lines and geoglyphs have been conserved for a new generation. Due to Maria's efforts, the geoglyphs and Nazca lines now have a protection area that extends to over 75,000 hectares and are well defined and together with their surrounding landscape, making a harmonious relationship that has survived virtually unaltered for millennia. Ricci spent almost 60 years of her life in the Nazca Desert, still remembered well in the town of Nazca for regaling locals and visitors with her magnetic storytelling. She is also revered for her unceasing life's work, which included cleaning the contours of almost 1,000 lines with ladder and broom. She also defied those in the local area who wanted to convert the area into immense agricultural operations. Her studies, collected in 60 notebooks, are illuminated by her conservationist zeal. Her contributions to the geometry and astronomy of ancient Peru were published in 1993, when she was 90 years old. Maria Ricci died in 1998 at the age of 95. She had devoted more than half her life to the measuring and mapping of the Nazca lines. Her intensive work for many years was also costly to her health, as the exposure to the bright desert sun eventually caused her to go blind. During her lifetime, she received much acknowledgement and numerous honors from all over the world and inspired many new generations of scientists and archaeologists with her passion for preserving the Nazca lines. One of her greatest achievements was the nomination of the lines and geoglyphs of Nazca as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1995. Her great efforts in the protection and maintenance work of the site had now become the responsibility of the Peruvian government. Indeed, the research and conservation efforts done by Maria Ricci and others ensured the survival of the Nazca lines for future generations and brought the site into much wider fame throughout the world. This wider popularity of the site due to Maria Ricci's initial research and publications then led to other scholars and commentators to visit the site. These scholars would then come up with their own theories for why the site was constructed. Without a doubt, the most infamous theory about the Nazca Line's origin from the numerous researchers now investigating the site was proposed by Erich von Däniken in his 1968 book, Chariot of the Gods. This theory held that ancient Nazca was the landing site for extraterrestrial spacecraft, the alien beings supposedly imparting to local people with special knowledge and technology before returning to their home planet. After the departure of these ancient astronauts, the Nazca culture built a series of giant images and designs as messages to the extraterrestrial beings from the sky, whom they viewed as gods. This theory has achieved widespread notoriety after being featured in the popular History Channel series Ancient Aliens. In early 2018, images of Nazca mummies from Kawatche, resembling stereotypical depictions of extraterrestrials, also went viral on internet social networks. The academic credentials and research methods of the Russian researcher behind these images have since been called into question, but the images have brought even more attention to this far-out theory and to the Nazca lines in general. Another slightly off-the-wall theory was proposed by Jim Woodman in the 1970s. He concluded that the only way the Nazca people could have constructed these lines in the sand would have been to have achieved flight. This presumption was not based on any particular evidence, although he did claim to have found a pottery fragment depicting a hot air balloon. He eventually built a hot air balloon using local materials in order to test his theory. After several failed attempts, the balloon was finally able to take flight, although only for a few minutes. One variation of the solar calendar hypothesis put forward by Maria Ricci was suggested by independent researcher and self-styled ecliptologist Robert Edgar. The theory holds that the Nazca lines and geoglyphs were meant to be seen by the so-called Eye of God, or eye in the sky, which is seen during total solar eclipses. The theory proposes that the Nazca lines were intended as offerings or a possible form of communication with a sky-dwelling god or gods. In 1980, Georg von Breunig proposed a theory that the Nazca lines may have been used as a special racetrack, where athletes competed in Olympic-like events to honor the gods. One of the most compelling theories about the origin and purpose of the Nazca lines was proposed by a group of American researchers, including Johann Reinhardt. This theory holds that due to the incredible aridity of the Nazca Desert, the most likely explanation for the designs is that they were incorporated in ancient rituals imploring the gods for rain. Researchers point out the animal symbolism is common at ritual sites throughout the Andes, so the use of these designs in religious ceremonies is the most logical explanation for their construction. In another variation of the water cult theory, Professor Anthony Aveni has noticed that the Nazca lines seem to converge in spoke patterns and trapezoids. This point of convergence is at the spot where surface water enters the river valleys or patches of elevated land between streams. This nexus place could be an ideal place for rituals to thank the gods for providing water. And while these are the most popular theories for the origins of the Nazca lines, new evidence is being discovered to this day, and more research than ever before is being done within the Nazca region. The discovery of 143 new geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert and the surrounding area was announced in 2019 by Yamagata University and IBM Japan. One of these geoglyphs was found by using machine learning-based methods scanning through images of the desert. The university has found nearly 300 new geoglyphs in the region since 2012. Lines forming the shape of a cat were discovered in a hill in 2020. The figure is on a steep slope prone to erosion, explaining why it had not previously been discovered, until archaeologists carefully revealed the image after initially spotting it with an aerial drone. The recent research shows that the people of this region were even more industrious than previously imagined, and it likely shows how central and important the Nazca lines were as religious and ceremonial monuments. In recent years, the Nazca lines have also become a much more popular tourist destination, in part to its addition to the UNESCO World Heritage Site list and also its many features and many conspiracy theories in relation to extraterrestrials. A development that is a welcome sight to the local economy, with tours via air or ground now being widely available in the region. In summation, the Nazca lines are incredible works of art that, thanks to the great effort of Dr. Maria Ricci, have been preserved and will continue to stand as monuments to the Nazca culture for a millennia to come. And while there is still no definitive agreement, and likely never will be, on the mystery for the reason of their construction and whether they were used as giant solar calendars, part of water cult rituals, or messages to extraterrestrials, the Nazca lines nonetheless show how magnificent the engineering achievements of a pre-Columbian culture and how advanced the societies of ancient pre-Columbian South America truly were.